5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And it's live.
This is Leicester Till I Die TV. Watch and subscribe on YouTube and listen on your podcast platform.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good whatever. Hello, welcome along. This is LTID TV from Leicester Till I Die. Feels a bit like Christmas, Easter this. Once a year, I have this very nice and fine gentleman join me to talk all things PSR and Leicester City. Kieran, it's been a year, but welcome along.
Thanks very much, Chris. I do often feel I'm a bit like the Grim Reaper when I appear on some of these shows because PSR is a happier little room for some clubs than it is for others.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I suppose the way to look at it is we've only got ourselves to blame.
In the sense that I think it's the polite description, recruitment has been a bit haphazard. The club was perhaps overly confident of its ability to retain Premier League status as far as season 22-23 was concerned. And the hangover from that is very significant, especially it was probably the worst time for things to go slightly off the grid, in the sense that, as well as having the big six, I think you can realistically say now in Aston Villa and Newcastle United, we've got clubs who their chances of being relegated for the foreseeable future are, they're not zero. No, nobody's at zero, but they're probably in that you put them as a one percenter. Whereas both of those clubs over the course of the last decade have spent time in the Championship. And then you've got sort of the slightly irritating kids, the likes of Bournemouth and Brighton and Brentford, who are using algorithms and analytics and Moneyball techniques to take those sort of 10th to 13th places. And all of a sudden, if you're a football club in the Premier League who get promoted, instead of realistically at the start of the season saying, okay, it's 3 from 9, it's 3 from 10 in who can go down, you look at it now and you probably go, well, it's probably 3 from 5. Yeah, that's and that has resulted over the course of the last two seasons in the clubs being promoted, not just being relegated, but being relegated before, realistically by February or March. Yes, you can put in a run of 5 or 6 games of consecutive victories, and we do have memories of that taking place, but that was always the exception rather than the rule, and it's becoming increasingly the exception. So maintaining a place in the Premier League following promotion is a really, really tough gig. It's not impossible, but it's very, very grim.
But I mean, you mentioned clubs like the Bournemouth now, and it's I'm glad to see, because obviously I live near Bournemouth, so I've kind of got a bit of a sort of a soft spot for them, and I've followed their journey from where they were to where they are now. But when you talk about clubs like your own Brighton, Bournemouth, etc., that used to be Leicester.
It did, and I think this is where I don't know the inner workings of football clubs, so I'm not going to speculate too much. sometimes you get a little bit self-satisfied in life, and you take your eye off the ball. And football, where you are restricted in having 2 transfer windows a year of one of 4 weeks, one of a couple of months. If you get those decisions wrong, you get it wrong 2 or 3 times in a row, and it's actually very difficult to extricate yourself. So I'm not a football person. I'll be honest. I don't know what a good footballer is, and I'm very, very fortunate that I teach for both the League Managers Association and the Professional Footballers Association, and you get to meet footballers and football people in a different environment. And the more I listen to them, the more I realise that how little I know about football as a civilian, for want of a better phrase.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm not in a position to criticise the sort of the technical side of the game, and certainly that's not my area of specialism anyway. But looking at Leicester City in terms of they had a £400 million squad when they were relegated in a couple of years ago, something was the wheels were starting to fall off.
Yeah, I mean, the obviously plenty of blame. A lot of the fans are blaming a certain director of football. I don't think it's necessarily all down to one man. That would be, I mean, I'm sure if the toilets got blocked in the home end, he'd get the blame for that. But something obviously has happened. A lot of people are saying that Top isn't the man that his dad was, and maybe he needs to grow tougher and make changes in the people that sort of help and support him. But it does feel. I mean, I did a show last night with just a couple of other fans, and I did, the word that came up was vindictive. Like, we knew, you said a year ago that this could still come back and bite us on the bum. Yes, we'd got out of it, but it wasn't, the end of it. They were going to make sure, it feels to us like they were going to make sure that they got us at some point.
Yeah, I mean, if we take a look at what came out yesterday, I think there's been a little bit of window dressing by the Premier League, because first of all, the Commission said that the Premier League's attempt to charge Leicester City for the losses made for the 3 years to 30th of June 2023, Leicester did successfully defend them, and so that was a defeat for the Premier League, and that did come across as a bit petty. From my point of view, because what possible gains? They will say, well, we had to establish a set of principles and rules going forwards. As far as the losses for 23-24 are concerned, I don't think this is an anti-Leicester issue, but there's no doubt that both the Premier League and the EFL have been superbly outmanoeuvred by Nick DeMarco. In the sense that, and I will say that there's not bad lawyers, there's bad laws, and the regulations of both the Premier League and the EFL were not stress tested enough. They weren't waterproof, and if you are going to have a set of rules, then we know it was a loophole. But why was it a loophole? Because the Premier League and the EFL had drafted the rules poorly to begin with. And there's not. If you create a loophole, don't blame somebody if they take it. No. It's
funny that Simon Jordan was backtracking yesterday. That whilst he wasn't, I mean, he really had to go at us when we did find that loophole. But I'm sure he would have done if he'd still been in charge of Palace. It'd have been him. But he did backtrack a little bit. He says, "I don't blame Leicester for doing it, although I wasn't happy at the time." But look, they were always going to close that loophole, and I understand that. We are now being charged by the Premier League for the season when we were in the EFL. And the EFL, which was the to be honest with you, that they've changed their rules for 25-26 moving forward, which was the original point of this show, and then obviously this has come up. It almost feels like restrictive trade because you've got the two, companies that it's like, would Sainsbury's be allowed to buy out Morrison's? You've got the two main football organisations in this country basically running a closed shop.
Yeah, although what's the alternative? The Premier League itself is a breakaway competition, which was set up as an alternative to the way that football used to be run. If you take a look at Project Big Picture, and I've very kindly sent the full set of rules for that. Somebody leaked those to me at the time. What was going to happen was that the big six clubs were going to resign from the Premier League and rejoin the EFL. This was one of the threats they were making.
Okay.
So, alternative competitions is not an area to. I think there's a very good case for saying, why not just have 92 clubs and one organisation running it all?
Yeah,
going back, and I think the shortfalls and the weaknesses that existed in English football as far as the 1980s and the early 1990s are concerned, I think those have been addressed in the sense that football is no longer a horrible place to attend. We do have fantastic stadiums. We do have investors willing to bring money into the game. It has become global. It has also changed because it's no longer a sport and it's part of the entertainment industry, as much as we might delude ourselves otherwise. And also the quality of the product is just amazing. You watch, you compare football now to the 1980s, and we're nostalgic for the 80s and the 90s, but the football is light years ahead of where we used to be. It's different, but technically, tactically, it's so much more advanced. It is a strange one with the rules. The fact that the Premier League can now charge clubs for the season they were in the Champions, well, that should have been the case. Why on earth wasn't the rule book set up for that? It does show just how weak things are. And I guess some Leicester City fans might be saying, well, hold on, we're already relegated. Why are you going through this palaver? Why are you going through the costs of having an independent hearing? Well, the reason for that is that Leicester City finished the season in 18th position. Now, should a points deduction be applied, they could finish in 19th or 20th position. If I'm Ipswich Town, if I'm Southampton Football Club, and I'm getting £3.5 million per position, then you can see why those two clubs would want it. It could mean that if there's a substantial points deduction, let's face it, it'd have to be bloody big to go below Southampton because they've stunk the division out, as everybody knows.
Yes, yeah.
But if you
even we beat them, that's saying something,
then Leicester City are at £6.87 million worse off. So the Premier League does have that duty towards the other clubs. So you can see why it's going to be done. But it then begs the question, why has it taken so long? Now, part of the Premier League's argument is that if you take a look at the whole range of charges, it includes what they're saying, some form of delaying tactics for showing the Premier League last year's accounts and non-cooperation mutterings, similar to those that we saw at Manchester City as part of the 115 charges there. So that's the space we are in as far as this season is concerned. And let's be honest, Chris, you as a fan, if you finish 19th instead of 18th, it's not going to make it any more of a crap season.
No.
You've suffered long and hard enough. My concern is what's going to happen over the course of the summer and the EFL. Because probably on around about the 13th or the 14th of June, so it's normally sort of the second week in June, Leicester City will transfer its share in the Football Association Premier League Limited to Leeds United or Burnley or one of Sunderland and Sheffield United. And in exchange for that, it will become a shareholder in the Football League Limited. Football League, the EFL, Leicester City's not their favourite club either, because again, outmanoeuvred, nutmegged, however you want to describe it, when the EFL tried to put Leicester City under the throes of a business plan and some form of transfer embargo. And again, our good friend Nick DeMarco said, well, you can't do that. And the EFL went, oh, no. So that would be my main concern. What's happened with the Premier League? Bit annoying, bit irritating, but this does indicate that where we are as far as the position going forward is concerned. And ultimately, from we know what we're like as fans. It comes to the start of August. We've got very short memories. You start looking forward to the season again, and you start focusing on promotion. Well, if there's outstanding issues with the EFL, which we won't necessarily find out for a few months, that could get messy as well.
Yes. I haven't seen the EFL statement about this yet. Apparently, there were rumours they were going to bring one out yesterday. I haven't seen it yet. But just looking at the Premier League statement, we've broken PSR rules. The rules are there, and we're playing in their domain, so we have to obey by their rules. The side's obligation to provide its annual accounts to the Premier League by the end of December. And the thing that we were talking about last night was, surely it's like if you're doing your tax returns, if you're self-employed, you have a date and you've got to get them in by that date. How can somebody that you would hope that is doing the accounts at a Premier League football club do something silly like get the date wrong? Or was it purposefully delaying it?
Okay, they didn't get the date wrong. They knew the deadline. It was a conscious decision, in my opinion. I can't say that for any certainty. In my opinion, no. It was a conscious decision by the club. We are going to breach this particular rule. Why did they choose to do that? Well, then we enter the realms of speculation. I can assure you, Leicester City is as a £100 million a year business. It will have done its internal accounts. It will have done its cash flow forecasts and so on. The accounts were there. So I don't see that as being an issue in terms of the print. It was simply, we're not going to send them to you. It's not a case that we've not done them.
Right. And what would they have hoped to have gained by that?
Well, what they will have hoped to have gained is that if they had submitted the accounts earlier, the way that the Premier League constitution works is that you're supposed to submit your accounts by the 31st of December each year. And that gives the Premier League, according to its own rules, and I'm just sort of looking up documents here, it gives them 14 days in which they can then instigate charges under normal circumstances. So the aim of the Premier League is that if you've messed up your accounts for 23-24, you submit them by the 31st of December 2024. The Premier League therefore has until the 14th of January 2025 in which to say, right, we're not happy with these. We're now going to install a commission with the aim of putting through a points deduction in season. Because if we take a look at what happened with Nottingham Forest and Everton, some of the complaints from other clubs is that, well, hold on, why has it taken so long? If that points deduction had taken place earlier, we would not have been relegated. So this was the aim, and the intention was very much to try to create a scenario in which things were resolved quicker. They were resolved in season, and therefore this would have given greater clarity. At the 31st of December, Leicester were not in a good position in the Premier League. Let's not deny that. But they were not certain of going down. So this was a way of kicking that particular can down the road. And the Premier League say, well, hold on, the rules were there to prevent things like that happening.
Yeah.
We are not happy with that.
And I have to say, I in that instance, I get that. We tried to play the game, no pun intended, and we got caught out. The third one, which I kind of sort of struggle with, that there were again, I'll get my teeth in here. The third point that they made was the club's obligation to provide full, complete, and prompt assistance to the Premier League in response to the league's inquiries. It's almost like, and I know obviously this happened with Sheffield United. This happened also with Notts Forest a couple of seasons ago, where you get points knocked off and then they give you points back for good behaviour. But it's almost like, to me, as a Joe Public looking at that, it's almost like, well, I can't really, if they charge me, if I actually just say, well, excuse me, I don't agree with that, that's going to hurt me. I should be at least allowed to say, well, look, hang on a second, but it doesn't seem to allow you to do that.
Well, I think what the Premier League is saying here is that we asked you for information and you failed to supply it to us. You used delaying tactics. Now that's quite common. I'm just checking, Chris. I've just gone back to Leicester's accounts for 2024. They were signed off by Susan Whelan on the 19th of December. So therefore, there was and they were signed off by the auditors on the 19th of December 2024. So why were they not submitted to the Premier League by the 31st of December? That's for the club to answer. Which, of course,
unfortunately, you can put two and two together. We might be coming up with 5, but
we're probably coming up with 4.
Yeah, yes. It's not, and this as a fan is kind of worrying because we always said when Milan Mandrić sold Portsmouth, unfortunately he sold it to somebody that wasn't fit and proper to run a football club and ended up fleecing poor Portsmouth. And when we sold it to King Power, we're there like saying, well, thank you, Milan. You picked somebody. Look how nice they've been. They buy us the occasional beer and what have you. But now things are coming out, and you're beginning to think, hang on a second. When they're doing stuff like this, are these sort of the people we really want running the football club? If we've done something wrong, let's just admit to it, take the punishment, and move on.
Well, I can see it from both points of view. Manchester City have taken exactly the same stance. They have not cooperated.
Yeah.
Or they've alleged to have not cooperated. I mean, if we go back to Manchester City's charges from UEFA, Manchester City were actually subject to a huge fine. And people say Manchester City were found innocent. Well, they were found guilty of non-cooperation. And as far as the 2-year ban, it wasn't a unanimous decision. It was a 2-1 decision by the CAS. So it wasn't quite as clear cut as I think many made it out to be. Leicester City's directors, Leicester City's owners, their main focus is trying to achieve Premier League status for Leicester City. Perhaps, and I'm saying this is a big perhaps if they felt that if they cooperated to a greater extent, if they had provided with the accounts by the 31st of December, then they would have been subject to a charge. They probably would have had a points deduction, which would have reduced the chances of avoiding relegation. So therefore, they made a strategic decision. It's backfired on them because they have been relegated, and now they're getting the charges, and things are starting to, and you just want to put this season to bed, I would imagine, Chris. Let's be honest, it's been god awful as a Leicester fan.
It certainly have, and yes, I'm quite right. I mean, again, last night we kind of came up with the scenario that, look, let's just do it now. Let's just take whatever's going to be thrown at us. We've got more games next season. I mean, do you think that sort of may be affected? We've got 46 games. Sheffield United have shown it was only 2 points, but they got that deduction and still survived. They're in a very good place to come back up to the Premier League, of course. And the question that I was asked a lot last night was, well, no, let me do that point first of all. So, do you think that had something to do with it? The fact that, well, hang on, rather than 38 games to try and get back 6-8 points, we've got 46 games to try and get back those points.
I don't think so. And the reason why I say that, Chris, is that if you take a look at the rulings for the likes of Birmingham City, who are subject to a points deduction, and also Nottingham Forest and Everton, when both of those clubs put in an appeal, one of the things which they referred to was the difference between the number of games in both divisions. So you're more likely to get a more a much harsher tariff in the EFL, because you're looking at it sort of, if it's going to be a quarter point per game or something like that, then you've got more games, you're going to have a higher points deduction. So I don't see that. And also Sheffield United's points deduction this season was for late payment of transfer fees rather than the PSR breach.
Oh, right.
More of a cash issue.
Right, no problem. No, I get that. A few say that the other point that was brought up last night by people saying, well, look, how are clubs supposed to sort of survive? When you look at the likes of Reading, at the likes of Bolton, Derby, they get a points deduction because they've been naughty, but then that point deduction makes them drop to another division below, so they're going to make less money to try and get back up to sort themselves out. And it's almost like kicking a man when he's down. I mean, I'm not saying that, there shouldn't be a punishment, but, we have seen, and we're not saying we're going to go out of business, but there's a very good chance. There's nothing to say that we're not going to do, Luton Part 2.
Yeah. Outside observer would say Leicester City will be one of the favourites in the Championship next season. If we take a look at the three clubs that you mentioned, the owner of Reading lost £200 million. The owner of Derby County lost £200 million. Eddie Davis, the former owner of Bolton Wanderers, lost £175 million. So they were not bad people. They were people who made bad decisions. And as anybody who's ever been divorced will say, that happens often when you go into something with the best of intentions.
Yes.
So it is complex. It is nuanced. And again, I understand where you're coming from in the kicking man when he's down, but the purpose of having those types of sanctions is to act as a deterrent. And if there is a deterrent and you choose to ignore it, so if we take the case of Derby County, there were a set of rules. They thought that they'd found yet another loophole, and the owner had a short-term fix, or rather, not the owner, the club applied a short-term fix. Not only did that lead to a points deduction, it also led to the club going into administration and all of the costs that brings. It also, if you, I'm actually a qualified accountant. Whilst I just spend most of my time, as far as the world of social media is concerned, mucking around on the internet. Yes. I do know a little bit about.
I won't tell the wife.
Yes. And again, if you look at what happened to the auditors of Derby County, one of the audit partners got sanctioned. Now, as I can assure you, as a professional accountant, you don't normally prosecute your own. And the firm that did the audit of Derby County Football Club got fined £100,000 for the workaround, shall we say?
Yes.
I know whose idea it was. I'm not prepared to say that in public, but I'm absolutely appalled by their behaviour professionally.
Right. No. Again, good points. This talk, obviously, I don't know whether the transfer embargo we had a transfer embargo before we got promoted, when there was no transfer window. So, that didn't really affect us. I don't know that will still be in place when we go down, but does the transfer embargo? And let's tie it in with the management plan. When we've heard this thing about a management plan, what does that include? Do they come in and run the club for you, or do they make decisions, or do they just check decisions you are making and going, you can't do that, you've got to sell, can they make you sell players? What does the first of all, the management plan and then the transfer embargo actually involve?
As far as the management plan is concerned, what you have to do is that you have to present a budget for the forthcoming season to the EFL. They assess it for reasonableness. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to say, we're going to pay all of our players 50 quid a week, they go, no, come on, you're taking the mickey.
Yes.
So they will assess it for reasonableness, and also they will compare the actual results to your budget on a month-by-month basis. And if you're going off-grid in terms of the numbers, they'll say, right, you've got to make cutbacks, you've got to get back to where you claimed you were going to be at this particular point in time. So it's a bit like having somebody looking over your shoulder.
Right.
Can they force you to sell individual players for individual prices? No, they can't. But what they can say is that unless you improve the finances, if you are deemed to be not adhering to the management plan, we reserve the right to take further action. And that further action, transfer embargo, some form of points to, creating another commission because you've not adhered to the management plan. So the commission could conclude that the appropriate penalty for this is an on-field penalty in the form of a points deduction.
So they can't come to us, let's say, for example, and look, we know that there are going to be certain players that are going to go simply because you'd get that when you're relegated anyway. We know Hermanson will almost certainly go, probably El Canoes. The thing that kind of kept me going was, well, we've got a really good crop of youngsters coming through. But as somebody said, they're going to be the players that other clubs are going to be sort of interested in. But we want to obviously try and keep hold of those. The way I would then read that is that they will come to us and say, right, you've got to find 30 million from somewhere to balance your books. Now, it's up to you who you sell. Though they can't come along and say you must sell Will Alves or you must sell, whatever. But if we don't make those sales, I suppose they could then come in and say, you're going to have to have another points deduction.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The EFL can't do that, but what the EFL can say is that you are in breach of the management contract. Therefore, we're going to prosecute you for that, and the commission will determine A, if you're guilty, and if B, any subsequent penalties and the nature of those penalties.
So maybe it's not the end of the world then. When you think, because you see these headlines like management plans, and I've got a thing like a supply teacher coming in and sort of sitting there and saying like, you have to sell Ben Nelson, or you have to sell this player. So that's not too bad. And I get what you're saying about the EFL sort of working together. I mean, also as well, these things are 3 years rotating, aren't they? It's a 3-year plan. So, and again, as somebody said, Kate, one of the co-presenters on here, she said, it's like a washing machine cycle. You've got to wait for those 3 years to go out. And look, we didn't buy any players, let's be honest with you. We bought some at the start when we first got promoted. Fair enough. In January, we did cut our cloth accordingly. I think we spent 2.5-3 million on one player. So I guess you could look at that and go, they're trying to make the effort. But that's not. I suppose it's not going to happen just in one 12-month period.
No, but I mean, the good news for Leicester City is that the accounts for 21-22 drop out of the equation. Leicester lost £92 million that year. They only lost £19 million in 23-24 due to successful player sales. So the accounts are in not as bad a position coming out of that cycle, going into the next 3-year assessment period. So there are some positives to be drawn.
Again, I'm being very sort of blasé about this here, but when you look at Chelsea, and they sold, was it the Women's Football Club back to themselves or whatever? I mean, King Power, we own a lot of, shopping centres, buildings, etc. Could they not say, like I say, I'm being totally, off grid here, could they not say, well, look, there's this shopping centre that's worth 50 million in Bangkok. Leicester City are going to buy that for whatever, then sell it back to ourselves and all that. Or is that sort of thing not allowed? And I'm just thinking of how these other clubs get away with it.
Yeah. I think it's a valid point to have raised. When Chelsea sold hotels and car parks to itself in 22-23, it made a profit of around about, I think it was £66 million, and the Premier League said, yeah, you're taking a rise there, so they reduced that by £6 million. The response of the Premier League to the sale of the women's team, I think, is going to be interesting. By a pure coincidence, at the weekend, an American investor came in and says, I value Chelsea Football Women's Club at a huge amount of money. So he's valued it at £248 million and bought 8% of the club on that basis. A cynic would say that that's very convenient. Oh, he's but he's not deemed to be a related party. It certainly helps the Chelsea cause, and as somebody that has taught creative accounting during my career, at times there are ways and means of doing things which you might say it doesn't pass the smell test, but it does pass the legal test.
Yes, no, I get what you're saying. And the other thing as well is that our old training ground at Beaver Drive, which obviously we moved out of when we had Seagrave built, the new training ground, it's now part used by the women to train on. Now, that is not far from the city centre. It's funny enough, it's not far from the Walker Stadium and what was Filbert Street as well. When you build a training facility like we've got, surely that can accommodate the men and the women, and then the training ground at Beaver Drive, which will be quite a size, could be sold for quite a bit of money. And we're sat here as fans saying, well, why isn't that being done? I mean, surely the club should be looking at these sort of things.
I can assure you the club will have looked at those. And what I would say, Chris, isn't it a tragedy that we're even having this conversation?
Yes.
Because you did not fall in love with Leicester City Football Club when you were that high, and you went along to that first match with whoever it was, and the floodlights, the grass, the noise, the smell of the burgers, police horses, everything. You go, oh my God, this is a completely different world. I want this part of my life for the remainder of my life. And we've ended up about selling car parks.
Yes.
What on earth have we created?
That I mean, yes, it's not about winning now, is it? And it should be. That's what it should be down to at the end of the day. Is you're going out, you want to win a game. I know they say, it's all about the taking part. That's rubbish. We want to win. You know what I mean? I very much, I watched the big match a lot on ITV4, and it goes back to sort of, the 70s when you were playing in the mud bath, and you look at the grounds, and I can remember going to watch Leicester versus Coventry when they were at Highfield Road. We lost 4-1. It pissed down with rain. I was wet through because it was open air. I had my bollocks smashed against a divide. But it was simpler times, and there was none. The players sort of would sit in the toilet during the manager's talk, having a fag. It was just, yes, you could say the product is better now, but with that means we've become customers more than fans. I mean, when there was COVID, we need the fans. We need the fans. Yeah, that soon disappeared, didn't it?
It did. But remember, we're operating in an environment where relegation from the Premier League is going to hit Leicester to the tune of 70 or 80 million pounds. Players will be looking at reductions in their wages. Based on my figures here, in the final season in the Premier League, the average weekly wage at Leicester was £91,000. It was only £47,000 a week in the Championship. So we're talking about, on an individual level for employees, there are £1 million a year plus consequences of promotion and relegation, and that romance, that innocence that the game used to have, no longer exists because it's now business. And also, it's not the sports business; it's the entertainment business that they're in. And when I talk to people at big clubs in this country, they say our rivals are not Leicester City or Brighton or Palace. Our rivals are Taylor Swift and the NBA and the NFL and Real Madrid and Barcelona, but not other clubs in the UK, because we are such and such a football club, and that's what we benchmark ourselves against.
A question there from Michael. Is administration a possibility? I would very much think probably not.
Yeah, there's no indication of the bills not being paid. Is the club in an okay position in terms of borrowings? Yeah, it's okay. It's still losing money every year, so it's having to be dug out of that financial situation. But there's no indication, certainly from what I hear from Thailand, that the owners are going to do a die younger at Reading and just turn the taps off.
Well, they do. They have paid. I mean, the argument is that they created the loans, but in fairness to Top, he does pay them off at £90 million a throw. I suppose the question would be, and I know you haven't got a magic ball, and you can't sort of say this. If you got to go, yeah.
Soon, yeah.
So yeah, very quick, mate. This is the last question. Then, what do you think we're likely to get hit with?
Well, on the basis of my calculations for 22-23, I thought it would be 7 points. Now, on top of that, we have what the Premier League refer to as mitigating and aggravating issues. The mitigating circumstances, if you take a look at the Forest verdict, Forest would have had a higher points deduction, but because in the eyes of the Premier League Commission, they cooperated. It's a bit like if you committed a crime and you know you committed a crime and you go along to the police station and you go, look, I've done something I shouldn't have done. I'm handing myself in. And you go to the judge and you say, I've done something horrendous. I really regret it. You will get a lower sentence.
Yes.
Okay. So that's mitigating. So aggravating circumstances is me. I was helping an old lady across the road. I was rescuing a kitten from a tree. And then subsequently. So, picking up the vibes from the Premier League, and also I'm presuming you've read the Athletic article. They were quoting 12 points. I think that's unlikely, but if that's what the Premier League's pushing for, I'm not in a position to say anything different.
That hopefully, if it is 12, they've gone in high so that they can come back and we can shake hands and look very good and say 7. Look, I've got to say, I've put your details up there. It's in the chat. thepriceforfootball.com. Great podcast that you do on Spotify. Where else is it as well as Spotify?
Yeah, I think all podcast hosts.
All podcast.
I think we do it. Yeah, and I irritate people on Twitter as well. On practically a daily basis. I've made myself unpopular with Arsenal fans today.
Oh, that's the last thing you want to be. It's popular with Arsenal fans. Isn't that the club that didn't win anything again? I'm just putting it out there. Putting it out there. Kevin, thank you. Kieran, thank you so very much for coming on. Please let us have Brunetti again next season if you don't want him.
He's a good lad, isn't he? He's a cracking player.
He did well under Cooper, and he kind of went a little bit under when Van Nistelrooy came in, but scored a great goal the other day. And I think the problem sometimes with him is that he's up here. It was like when I watched Gascoigne when I lived in Burnley, and he moved to Burnley, Paul Gascoigne, at the end of his career. What his mind was saying for him to do with the ball, the rest of the players were like, what did you do that for? And I think sometimes that was a little bit like that with Brunetti. But look, go and have a listen to Kieran. Is at Kieran Maguire on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Links in the description below. I will see you in 12 months' time, mate.
Yes. And have a great 25-26, Chris. All the best, mate. Great
and you as well, mate. Good luck and good luck on Saturday. Take care. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks very, very much for Kieran there for coming on. Obviously, I had to go, but thank him. He makes it very clear. He made some good points there. 7 points. Could we live with that? I think we probably could. Average wage bill going down from 91 to 47. And Susan Whelan signing off the accounts and then not sending them in. A lot of things to discuss there. Hopefully, we're going to be back at 7 tonight with talk, of course, because, of course, Rude could be going. Russell Martin could be on the way in. Guys, like the video, subscribe if you're new. click that notification bell, and when we have to do one like this one at 2 in the afternoon, and that's to fit in with Kieran. Obviously, he's so he's everywhere at the moment: radio, press, TV. So I do thank him for giving up his time to come on. So do click that notification bell. Then we do go live. You won't miss us. Thank you very much to everybody that's in the chat. Thanks to Kevin. Hopefully, as I say, I could well be back at 7 o'clock tonight. I will see you then, if so. If not, definitely we'll be back tomorrow night. We might well be talking to Rob Tanner from The Athletic for his take on it. And also, we'll be doing a prediction show tomorrow night as well. I'm off. I'm on TalkSport later on myself. And we got Bournemouth at the weekend, and I'm on one of their channels for the preview. Thanks very much, guys. Have a good day. Take care. Goodbye now.
Thanks for watching. These videos are tremendous. You'd better like them too, or I'll be back.
This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSport Fan Network.
TalkSport. Powered by fans.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.